Hello and welcome back to Coinscrum Markets. I'm thrilled to be joined again by Nick Mancini, Chief Community Officer at Trade the Chain. Hi Nick, how are you doing?
Doing very well. How are you, Paul?
I'm very good, thank you. We've had an enforced break over the last couple of weeks, so good to be back. Lots to catch up on in that time. It might not have gone unnoticed amongst viewers. The Bitcoin's back up towards its all-time highs, which a little bit unexpected maybe, but I think we all know the reason. And that's probably the main piece of news that you want to talk about this week. And I'm guessing it's all to do with expectations around SEC approving a Bitcoin ETF, but a futures-based one. Thoughts?
Yeah, so that's pretty much all the news anyone talked about. I think the email that I sent you for the news drivers of the week was absence of neutral and bearish news drivers, because really all anyone is talking about is the SEC. If you've been on Twitter, if you've been on the news in the last 24 hours and you look up Bitcoin, it is ETF approval, SEC, something along the lines of that. So it does look increasingly likely. It's never a done deal, but it does look very, very likely based on the ticker filings of the funds who are registering the ETFs and the signaling of the SEC based on social and in back rooms, that a futures-based ETF will be approved, or Bitcoin futures ETF will be approved Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday at the latest. There's about 4 or 5 different funds jockeying for to be the first. There's 2 who have tickers already approved, Valkyrie and ARK. Generally, ticker approval is like the second to last thing you have to do before approval. So it generally does not happen unless you are very close to the finish line or have gotten that kind of signal from the boss man. So it is looking very likely, and we are expecting bullish, everything to be more or less kind of bullish in a bullish direction until the announcement, at least.
And yeah, is this a classic buy the rumor, sell the fact? We're gonna just come Tuesday, announcements made, and then we tank. Oh.
Yeah, so I think it's plausible that this we're currently kind of in the rumor phase. We kind of already know what's going to happen, but now that we're kind of getting the confirmation, people are feeling a lot more comfortable while entering the trade. The thing that is interesting to us is that the trade is getting a lot more crowded as this news comes in. You know, we had Larry Fink from BlackRock say positive things. We had Gary Gensler and the Fed saying that they're not going to ban stablecoins. This all happened within the last few weeks. So it's all kind of happening in a domino effect. And obviously Bitcoin has had 3 green weekly candles. So the trade is getting a bit crowded, and we would expect, bullish movement towards the news event. But once that happens, we would expect a typical sell the news style event as well. Although it's not guaranteed, it just the logic lines up in that direction when you've already seen so much. I don't want to call it front running because that wouldn't be the right term, but a lot of people entering the trade early, and you don't want to be the last one holding the bag.
Yeah. Well, that might be reflected in some of the charts that we'll look at soon, especially around Bitcoin's relative strength against other other tokens, etc. We'll come on to that, but I mean, it's got to be a pretty inefficient way of tracking the Bitcoin price, doing it through futures contracts. So again, it seems to be just a sentiment thing, market getting excited about it and just playing around the news of it. But look, none of this is bad, and even if this is a step towards a physical one, I know there's a few other dates coming up in the calendar throughout October and November for possible approvals which have not gone through before around spot or physical Bitcoin ETFs. So maybe it'll feed into that, and we'll come back and review those at the time. So let's look at this sentiment chart. I think it says it all really if we go into the Bitcoin sentiment chart to start with. What's this telling us, Nick?
Yeah, so what's interesting about the Bitcoin sentiment chart is that and I understand you may see a little bit of green, a flash of green and a flash of red on either side. Bitcoin sentiment has been more or less neutral since coming out of last weekend. So obviously Sunday, Monday is always kind of the bearish day, or, you know, it's kind of been Monday, Tuesday lately. So we had a bit of a drop there. We recovered, and then sentiment has just been neutral. And I think this is because the ETF news has been so prevalent that we're just getting these confirmation boosts, and sentiment isn't going crazy because I think the market, there's nothing overtly positive or negative about what's happening because we've all kind of more or less been aware of it. And also specifically for sentiment, you know, neutral can mean continuation of previous price action. You know, neutral is exactly what it is. There's no legitimate influence happening. So if Bitcoin has been on a bullish trajectory and you see sentiment is neutral for 5 days, why would you assume that any change is happening? There's no catalyst to signal that a change is indeed happening. So neutral sentiment during a bullish run is completely fine to me. The only thing I would be worried about is if it starts dipping into that extreme bearish territory, which we're probably going to see a big reaction when and if the big ETF news becomes announced. But you also have to remember, a lot of retail does not understand the impact that the futures ETF is going to have. It does seem a little bit mumbo jumbo-y. It seems like this is inefficient. It seems like there's going to be a lot of fees, and that is all correct. But that does not mean it's going to be a bad thing. So I have seen a lot of negative chatter on Twitter about Bitcoin in regard to the ETF, although the general consensus is this is a positive for price action. So it's very interesting how people are absorbing the news and what they're doing with it. But clearly, overall, things are neutral. Bullish price action is maintained. We have plus 15% trading volume. We have plus 22% tweet volume. I don't know how you could short this, seeing the sentiment chart. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, not been in the news in the same way. I'm sure it will follow. Generally does somewhere down the line, but no real talk around similar Ethereum ETFs at the moment. But let's look at the Ethereum sentiment chart.
Yeah, so Ethereum sentiment has been very volatile, and rightfully so. So as we'll discuss when we discuss the technicals and dominance levels, you know, Ethereum has definitely been in a zone where there's a lot going for Ethereum, but there's also a lot going for everything else in crypto right now. And if we looked at the fund flows, and if you're in the Trade the Chain community, I share generally weekly data about kind of institutional level information. And we were talking about fund flows. So basically for the first half of the year, all the fund flows were Bitcoin. And then eventually, like starting to get, you know, just before we kind of had the big, you know, if you want to call it crash, capitulation and onward, a lot of fund flows were in Ethereum. So we're starting to see Ethereum kind of come off a little bit, I think, as funds reallocate to Bitcoin because it's the sexy trade. And that just created a lot of wonky volatility for Ethereum, and it's made it easy to kind of push around. So if we look, the bearish sentiment coincides with price action. As soon as we got a bullish lift, that signaled pretty much a big boost that we just dealt with for the past 2 days. And now Ethereum is in a holding pattern just under, you know, resistance, which we'll discuss in a little bit. So the fact that sentiment is dipping while Bitcoin's neutral and Bitcoin looks like it wants to rise is a little bit worrying. And I'm kind of going back and forth on this too, but I think in my heart of hearts that Ethereum will likely follow Bitcoin, and that this kind of wonky sentiment, you know, pattern that you want to call it, I have a feeling that this is actually going to get a little bit more neutral as well. I think a lot of people are going to stop talking about Ethereum in the near future on Twitter. I think it's going to go neutral. And I think generally when there's an absence of conversation and volume is generally when whales like to take over. And I think we'll probably see a lot of volatility, more than likely to the upside for Ethereum. But be careful with Ethereum, specifically because all of the sentiment is on Bitcoin. You know, so just that's probably the biggest note for at least next week is just be careful because there may be an absence of volume and conversation. And whenever that happens, someone is taking advantage of that absence.
Yep. Okay. That all makes sense. Right. Let's see how this translates into the technical chart. Let's first look at the Bitcoin one.
Yeah, so this is a thing of beauty. I think anyone who this is the chart that we wanted, you know, coming off those lows late September. So Christmas has come a little early. We busted above the 0.786 fib level, which encompasses in this Fibonacci retracement encompasses the entire movement from peak to trough of 2021. And we just broke through the 786 fib, which is a very strong kind of, stalwart level. And the fact that we broke through this really tells me that the likely price action is going to be choppy movement all the way to the top of the fib retracement. So it does look like we are growing increasingly bullish. As you can see, just where we are currently, look at how much buy interest there is. There's as much buy interest above current price and at current price than there is 50% of current price or 40% lower than current price, which is crazy. People want the same amount of Bitcoin that they do at this price as they do around 40, 45K. That's telling. So it looks very good. But if something, let's say negative news event happens, a big whale sells, God forbid something happened with the network, whatever, the first support level would be that 786 fib level. I would expect some recovery there. I don't think there's anything that can really stop the Bitcoin train right now, other than a nuclear meltdown event on the globe. So worst comes to worst, let's say an asteroid's about to hit Earth, maybe we come down to the lower fib level. But also this fib is probably going to be very important if the ETF announcement comes. So like we were talking, if Bitcoin goes up during the rumor and it sells off during the news. Well, if we get to the top of the fib level, the sell-off will then be the two fib levels that we just discussed, the 0.786 and the 0.618. And I have to look at those. I always forget. But those would be the first two stops for the Bitcoin train if we reach the top of the fib level prior to the ETF news. So this is kind of an all-encompassing chart. You may see a lot of volatility in these top two boxes over the next 7 days.
Okay, yeah, I think I tend to agree with you, and it's always interesting when you start approaching former all-time highs.
Yes, you can see on the chart people like. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean just questions around double tops. I mean, I know historically when Bitcoin's come up to its previous all-time highs, it's generally got close and had an initial pullback, and then gone through a second attempt. So I guess that's something, and that kind of that aligns with what you just said there, and maybe we do get that sell-off after the news, and that's the initial pause.
Yeah, and you can see the technicals on the chart. Like everything is a bit overextended right now, and that's what I'm saying. The trade is overcrowded. Like it's clear. It doesn't mean that it's going to be done right now. There's always room to grow, but it's overcrowded. And if you are just entering now, if you're just seeing the show, you're just seeing the news. Please be careful, because there's going to be a lot of volatility in the current range, and we may see within a 7-day time the same price that we have today, in 5-7 days.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Let's move on to the Ethereum technical chart.
Yeah. So Ethereum is actually a little bit tougher to decipher based on what I had said yesterday, just because there's so much attention on Bitcoin. It's just like, what do we do with this thing? So I've not sold any Ethereum. I'm not underexposed. I have the same exact amount of exposure. I'm just probably not leverage trading Ethereum like I'm leverage trading Bitcoin. So I'll occasionally, if I go very long Bitcoin, I will take a Ethereum hedge. And I think that's a smart idea to do, because A, Ethereum may run with Bitcoin, and B, if it doesn't, then, you've got a decent hedge. So that's how I've just been treating it. But I have a feeling it'll more or less move in line with Bitcoin and follow a similar pattern. So we're just at that fib level that I mentioned before, that 0.786. It's coiling around. Generally, when you see a coil like this, we typically move to the upside, but there does appear to be a slight absence of buy interest at the current level. So I think what may be more likely is probably the orange, as we kind of consolidate a little bit under the current fib level and then move higher over the weekend. But I would be shocked if Ethereum didn't marginally move higher with Bitcoin. Like if it just completely stayed flat or fell on its face, I would be shocked, because I think there is still a very great bull case for Ethereum. And the more that Bitcoin grows and increases exposure around the globe, I still feel that that's good for Ethereum long term as well. So expect more volatility and more risk out of Ethereum. But if you are an Ethereum maxi, or you're strictly trading Ethereum or something like that, I'm expecting it to more or less follow Bitcoin.
Okay. Right. Well, we said at the top that this Bitcoin strength was going to be reflected in some of the charts we look at. I think none more so than the Bitcoin dominance chart here. We got right down to the previous lows from earlier in the year and a pretty strong bounce back up toward the top of this range. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so this is like this has been my favorite chart for the past few weeks, and I want to say the last time we talked, which was 2 weeks ago, is the 200 moving average was the target, and we saw that bounce that happened. I want to say that early October, pretty much that green candle on that bounce was I think the last time we talked, and I was like, it looks like a strong bounce to me, and a strong bounce it was. We went up for literally a week straight. We had a few volatile moments, but for the most part, that has been inching higher. We are currently at the 200 moving average as we speak, which is major resistance. But if Bitcoin continues higher, so will this candle as well. So I've outlined the 3 major resistance points, and I certainly expect Bitcoin dominance to reach 47 and 48%, potentially in the near term. I think 47% is a lot more likely than 48, but you know where it's going to be headed in what direction. So that's, I think Bitcoin's going to continue to move higher. I think Bitcoin dominance is going to go stronger. But as soon as we see that reversal, and I don't think it's going to be one candle, it's going to be, a holding period where we're like, what's the next move? But we could see a rejection, at the 47, 48 level. Because once, you have to think about sentiment, you have to think about optics, you have to think about dominance. If we get back up to levels that we were near before, and then the news washes away where Bitcoin's no longer in vogue and everyone just made a bunch of money on a Bitcoin trade, where do you think that money is going to go? Other places in the crypto market. It's going to cycle around to accumulate more money. So it's likely that whenever we reach this resistance point, it does reverse, but it will take a few days in a holding period to decipher that. But it doesn't, and when that does happen is when I will no longer be overweight Bitcoin and I will be overweight altcoins.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's look at also interestingly from the last time that we did speak a couple of weeks ago, the turnaround as well in Ethereum, in relative terms as well. So let's look at the Ethereum dominance, because that was, that had been creeping around lows again. We were talking about finding support on that moving average, and it's turned around nicely.
Yeah, so a lot of the technical formations that we had drawn for Ethereum have actually broken down. So it's more or less just up to kind of the classical technicals now. So moving averages, the 200 moving average has been a stalwart for all dominance levels on the daily chart. As we just saw Bitcoin as it was at 200 moving average resistance, Ethereum just bounced off 200 moving average resistance. It does look positive to see a strong bounce like that, but obviously we're being rejected by the confluence of the 50 and 100 moving averages. After talking with a few friends, we don't think this looks terrible, but it obviously signals what I kind of said before, is that you want to be trading Bitcoin. If you are trading Ethereum, it may follow Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is likely going to be the better actor in terms of price gains for your portfolio. So seeing this, it does look like Ethereum is moving in a positive direction. It has a very positive bounce, but if I go and look at the Bitcoin dominance chart, that's probably where I want to be. So with no negatives on Ethereum, it's just, why would you take the risk on something that is in a key inflection point where Bitcoin has everything going for it? And that's kind of what this chart's telling you.
Okay. And then finally, let's look at the others' dominance, everything outside of Bitcoin, Ethereum. A bit more choppy here.
Yeah, so this has been a very interesting chart since I started sharing it. The volatility, it's been in a 3% range. So pretty much the entirety of altcoins, which make up, a solid, good chunk of the market, about, 30, 40%. They've been in a 3% volatile range. And, we just saw what a 3% movement did to Bitcoin, so to see that in a day-by-day volatile range just shows you what's happening in the altcoin market. And it's very fragmented. There are a few top O1s moving. I've seen Phantom, I've seen, a few others move, and then a few are down in the gutter. So if you're on altcoins, it's very much a dart throw right now. And it's clearly what the Bitcoin chart has been telling you is Bitcoin is the daddy. and it's kind of, pushing around, bullying altcoins, if you want to call it that. What I've drawn here is basically a parallel channel. So this to me is more or less the channel of positivity for altcoins. So if you're beneath the dotted line, altcoins are not looking good. If this number is above the dotted line, then altcoins are looking good. So I think this is just a very good benchmark to say, where do I want to be trading today? If you can draw a parallel channel exactly as I have, and you treat it exactly as I said, you will probably be able to trade altcoins pretty decently. And that doesn't mean that if it's below that all altcoins are going to be in the gutter. There's always going to be a few, but if it's bouncing on support or it's moving higher towards the center or top of the range, that's going to be a good sign for altcoins. So just kind of use that as a barometer as you figure out what Bitcoin's doing, because I've been telling people on Twitter, I'll say it here, this is a good time to start hawking the altcoins that you would like to buy for later on. We know Bitcoin's going to go boom. We know it's probably going to affect some altcoin prices. So there's probably going to be bargains soon. So this is telling you, find your bargains. Now you can get good timing and start scalping the moonshots, the big risky assets that you want to gear up for later on in the course.
Okay. Right, well, that's definitely one to keep an eye on for the future. Nick, always a pleasure to speak to you, get your insights. Obviously, everyone should be keeping an eye on the announcements early next week, what it means for the market overall, and we will come back and take a look at what the fallout from that has been in a week or two's time. Nice to meet you.
Okay, so I'm going to